Welcome to this video tutorial on how to program an offline program for part number 1100, top 3 times circle direct. Alright, so to get started, we have already downloaded the blueprint from Blackboard, and our first move is to balloon the blueprint. So here I've ballooned it in PowerPoint. Certainly you could print this blueprint out and then balloon it with a red pen by hand. Either way would be fine, but we have to have some systematic way of saying which dimension is which. So there we are. Now we have also opened up Calypso here, and we'll start a new file. And the file name will be the same as the part name. So let's see if we can grab that off the PDF here. And before we even get started, we'll do a save as, so that way we don't lose our work. And notice that all of Calypso's default files go to Zeiss, Calypso Work Area Inspections, so that is where it will drop it by default. You can see I've already done this file one time. So let's go into my Downloads folder and we'll just add it there instead. Now one thing I'm going to add here is I'm going to put the word off at the beginning, and you'll notice that in the Blackboard submission as well. It says off for offline, meaning we're going to write this program offline. We will also write the same program in class on the CMM, so that way you can see the difference between online programming and offline programming. So Calypso thinks for a minute, and then we want to come into the CAD pull down and go to CAD file and load. And luckily, Calypso is written so that it comes exactly to the CAD cube that we want. So there are two different options here. We'll use both throughout the semester. The first one we're going to use is the top option, cadcube.sat. All right. My next move is to come down here into Show Wireframe Entities and to also show CAD models with surfaces, which will give us a shaded model. Now, we also notice that the gnomon, or XYZ triad here, is at the intersection of the top, the front, and the right surfaces, and that's actually not where we want it based on the blueprint. Looking at the blueprint, yeah, the top surface should be datum A, our primary alignment feature, but then the front surface should be datum B, and the left surface should be datum C. Calypso is very friendly about this. It will actually update your alignment as soon as we start doing our base alignment. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's start systematically. We'll come over to the CMM tab, and notice that under CMM settings, I am all green. That's a good sign. If that's anything other than green, it means you're missing something in your configuration. I also notice that the probe is green. Same thing here. If I didn't have the 3 by 50 millimeter stylus, I would want to change that at this point. Now, for offline programming, we actually can't use this CNC stylus system change. If we try to, you notice that all of these are colored red, and it will tell you that the stylus position is not defined. For instance, if I tried to left click on 1.5 by 31 and I right click and say load stylus system from holder, it just says wrong changer position and then makes me pick up the stylus anyway. I'm going to hit cancel on that. It gives me a red light. This window pops up. This is one thing that annoys me about Calypso. You can always just close out of that status window. You cannot close out of the stoplight window here. If it ever turns its light to red, simply turn it back to green. So this didn't work. This automatic stylus system change did not work. So what we're going to do for our offline programming is use manual stylus system change instead. So we'll click on that, and the only thing we ever have to worry about here, we're never going to release the stylus system. We'll simply pick up the stylus system. It'll tell you to insert it, and then you can pick whatever you want from the list. Now again, we won't be doing this in person. This is our tool change for offline. So it is kind of ironic. You would think that when you're offline, you'd be using a CNC stylus system change, and when you're online, you'd be using a manual stylus system change. But hey, it is what it is. The way the software is written, we have to do the exact reverse. For offline, we'll use manual stylus system change. When we're online on the real machine, we'll use CNC stylus system change. All right, now another thing I notice here is the way I have my software configured, for whatever reason, this stoplight keeps jumping to the background. I want to hit the view and make sure that that says always on top, right? Because this is how we're going to stop ourselves if we're in the middle of a program and we have to exit out. All right, so we are done on the CMM tab. We are going to come over to the measurement tab. Notice the red bar here tells us that something is not defined. So we'll come into base alignment, start right at the top, and we're going to work our way down. So we'll click on the base alignment button. This window is very overwhelming at first, so ignore it. Just hit OK. That brings us to another window that I would argue is a little bit overwhelming, but we're going to ignore this one for right now too, and it's actually going to auto-populate itself. We'll talk extensively about this later. I think you already saw some things on CurioZ about this as well. So we're going to ignore all this, and we're going to come down here to select or create geometries from the CAD model. So we'll click on that, and we'll click Define Select Geometry. And then we'll click directly on the top surface. And notice that that highlighted the top surface in pink. It named it Plane 1. And then for spatial rotation, which is our primary datum, it populated the z-axis, plane 1. For z-origin, it said plane 1. So we're in good shape. Next thing I want to do is define planar x-origin and y-origin. And we're going to do a plane line point alignment. Later you'll learn that Calypso actually prefers plane alignments, and we certainly could do that. And it's actually easier for programming initially, but it's harder for setup. So to keep the simplest setup we can on the actual machine, the next thing we'll do is hit whatever this button was called, I forgot already, and we'll click Define Line on Plane. We will click and hold the left mouse button to drag a line, and we want it to be somewhat parallel with the top plane there, and then we'll just let go. Notice that that line is on the front surface, and maybe it's a 1/4 inch or so below the surface. You might also be saying, hey, that goes right over that that cutout there, that slot. Yeah, that's okay. We actually haven't defined any points on this line yet. All right, so we've done our plane, we've done our line. As soon as we do our line, that comes in under planar rotation here. It defines itself to plus x-axis automatically. Calypso is pretty smart about this. And then for our y-origin, it sets it to the 2D line, so that's great. Right now we'll rotate our part using the mouse gestures, and then we'll hit the pull down or pull up on whatever this one's called again. And now we'll select Define Points, and we'll put a point on the left edge right there. That brings up this window, which also seems to be overwhelming. We're going to ignore that one for right now too and just hit OK. Now notice that our base alignment window, this is what allows us to find our part on the machine, it's been fully populated. We're just going to say OK. Now notice also that our base alignment is now green where it was previously red. This is a good sign. Now we'll come down here to clearance plane. This is so easy. Again, this looks a little overwhelming at first. If you have a CAD model, you simply say clearance plane from CAD model. And you could accept the default of 393 thousandths. I like to use 100 thousandths for my clearance plane. And then say OK. And if you ever get this pop-up window, and you should get it every time you set the clearance cube, it says, do you want to update your clearance plane settings for defined features? It seems like you want to say yes, they've colored it blue. You actually want to say no. Either way, it's not the end of the world if you click the wrong one, but if you say yes, it will actually update the clearance plane of anything on the front to retract in Y minus as I'm moving my mouse. It'll update anything on the left side to be X minus, anything on the back side to be Y plus, etc. Well, our probe only points down in the Z axis, so I do not want to update that. I always want my probe retracting along Z. All right, so the rest of these options are actually good as their default for right now. Multiple report, we're accepting the default. Measurement plan editor features is used for mass editing our program later. We'll use this often in the future. And then temperature compensation, we actually don't even have temperature compensation probes on our machine, so we're not going to worry about that. Basically, you would just set the material to tell the software how fast your material expands or contracts based on the temperature. All right, so that's that. Let's go see what we got. Now, we've been working systematically up till now. We did the CMM tab, then the measurement tab. Now we're actually going to skip the characteristics tab for right now because you need features to be able to make characteristics. And we'll jump right over to the features tab. Notice that we have a plane, a 2D line, and a point, and those are the features that we just added previously. Notice that the plane has a white bar. That means that we don't have anything defined about how to measure that plane. So let's click on the plane. That highlights it in pink on the screen. Let's double click on it. And that brings us to our feature window here. And we have all sorts of things we can do here. The only thing that we're going to focus on right now will be strategy. Notice that under strategy, we have clearance data. This gets us to and away from our feature safely. And notice that as soon as I open up this window, it's very subtle, but down here under select or create geometries from CAD model, it has already filtered itself to points. So we can simply click 1, 2, 3 points, and this is context sensitive. This window, this strategy window, had to be open to make this work. See how it added the probing points as soon as I clicked on them. See how in the graphics screen, it added the points here. The yellow is the points that I added first. The pink is the latest point that I've added. I can add as many as I want. And there are so many more powerful features within this as well, but that's all we'll focus on for now. So we'll hit OK to the strategy window. We'll hit OK to the feature window. And notice that that plane has now turned not only gray, but green. So these bars will start off white if Calypso doesn't know how to measure the feature. Then it will turn gray if it knows how to measure it, but has not measured it yet. And then it will turn green once it has all the data it needs to make a measurement. So this 2D line is still not defined. And the reason is, if we come into strategy, it does have a line auto path, but we don't actually want a line to be measured as a scanning path across here. That would dip into this little slot. So let's delete this. Let's right click and say cut to that line auto path, or you could just hit delete on the keyboard. Notice again that our select or create geometries button is highlighted on points, and let's click a point over here and a point over here. It adds the points, we say OK, and then we say OK. Now over here in point 1, by default, Calypso was able to measure the point and get all the information it needs, but just for ha-has, we double click and come into strategy, and there is our point there. So no need to modify that one. So we have just done our alignment. Let's go back and double check our alignment to make sure that we did it properly. So we'll come up here to Planner and Measurement Plan Simulation. And by default, the first thing that you want to do is click pause and then take this speed slider bar and slow it all the way down. For other defaults, we are currently showing our stylus system and we're showing nothing else. If you want to, you could show the CMM, but you'll notice that the CMM thinks the part is way up in the upper corner. It imported the CAD origin of the CAD model to the origin of the machine, and that's not helpful. And you might think that would cause problems, but it actually doesn't cause problems unless you ask Calypso for more information, like over travel information or collision information. We're not doing that in this video, and we'll cover this in a later video. So we'll turn that back off, and we will pretend that our part is located on the machine as it should be. Now notice the graphic of my probe here. We have the VAST sensor, which we have on our actual machine. We do have the 3mm ball by 50mm length probe, which we also have on the machine. So this is very good. So this simulation window can just hang out up here or down here or somewhere that's out of the way. I like to leave it right about here. And I'm in the features window right now. I still have nothing in the characteristics window. So features window is where we'll start. We'll hit run. We're going to do clear existing results, default PyWeb reporting. Under selection, we are going to do our named alignment. That's always going to be the third one down in the list. For right now, we'll do all characteristics, which is deceiving because we're running from features, not characteristics. Right? But we're going to basically do everything that we have available in this tab. From this, we'll go from feature list. We'll use clearance plane. And let's do step mode here. And for our speed, we should always select 40 and click Start. All right, so this window pops up, and this can actually be kind of cumbersome. I just do step mode by default, so that way students are used to doing that for the lab. But here, when you're offline, we can say switch to CNC mode, because now I can control this with step mode anyway. This level of permissions right here is overriding. So the reason we switch to CNC mode is I'm going to control that right here anyway. So I'll do my single step mode, my pause mode, and now we can see how the probe is going to move around to the part. We can see our first point, second point, and of course I'm clicking this single step button here for every single move, so that way we have a very large amount of control over what we're simulating here. It looks like everything is going exactly as planned. Now, another thing to note here is that when I set up the base alignment, this gnomon moved from the origin over here, the intersection of the top, front, and right side. It updated itself automatically to the intersection of the top, the front, and the left side, which is exactly what I expected to see. So it looks like this base alignment has gone successfully. This window may pop up. It's called Info on the Run. We can just turn off Display at CNC End and hit Close. And if you want to get that back later, you always can. All right, so that looks good. So now let's start measuring some features. So we'll come over here back to our Features tab. We'll come down to, I keep forgetting what this is called, whatever this dialog down here is called, and we'll be using this very, very often. And in this case, we are going to define circle on cylinder. And we'll come up and click on this circle right here. And notice that that adds the circle, but it does not add any information about it. It's still a white bar. All right, we also want to click on this circle and click on this circle, and they're all added to our features window here. All right, so that's all well and good, but when we double click on this first circle, that's this one over here, it does highlight it from the graphics screen, which is a nice feature. We want to come into our strategy and notice that there is no strategy applied. You may find that there's a circle auto path based on whatever defaults you have in your version of Calypso. If that's the case, you want to delete it. We want to be doing single points for this. Now, as soon as I open this up, notice again, this filter has set itself to points automatically. I'll click 1. Oh, sorry, I have to get out of this strategy first. And technical difficulties. It looks like I'm locked up here. Okay, if you are locked up at any point, you can do a Control-Alt-Delete, and you can come into Task Manager. Notice that I have a task here named VWNT.exe. That is Calypso. Hit End Task. You might get some error message like ASUS socket failed or something like that. And I'll pause the video and meet you back up again once I get back to where I left off.